only from the Dead Sea side. What will be the heights from the other side of the mountain? Only 300 feet. It's a fact to remember. A fact to remember. Number two, the mountain is prominent and relatively flat on the top and very isolated. That's number two. Number three, what will be the distance, okay, or what was back then the distance from the major city, which was Jerusalem. So how far is Masada from Jerusalem? Depending how do you travel to Masada. If you do it as we did it with the bus this morning, it's a long travel. It's a long road. But if you do it as they did it, by walking 40 miles, the exact distance, the geographical distance between Jerusalem and Masada, 40 miles, 2.5 days walking. Not very far. At that time, nobody was sitting with a GPS, measuring, every second. So Masada is in a different area, but not so far from Jerusalem. Number 4 and number 5, I will relate them to the fact that people lived and survived. And in order to live and to survive here on such a place, on such a mountain, they should have what? Water and food. So what was the major source of the food? En Gedi, the oasis where we just came from, which is not very far from Masada, and the big supply of the food was coming from En Gedi, and I'm talking about vegetarian food, dates, olives, grains, and I'm talking about dry food. Number 5 is the water. I told you already the joke about myself, saying at the beginning, it never rains here, and then all of a sudden one day it was raining. And when it almost never rains here, and there are no springs around the mountain, and by the way, this is a mountain, this is not a tell. Why it is not a tell? How many layers are on the mountain? Just one. Just one. This is not Megiddo or Beit Shean. The only option for them to bring water is to know from where the floods are coming. And I won't say again the stories about the floods. You know what? I will tell you something that happened to me in the last winter. This year, we went from Jerusalem to Masada with a group. We passed En Gedi. The driver pushed the brakes. We couldn't reach that day to Masada because the road was covered with water and boulders. We saw Masada from a distance, and we went back to Jerusalem. The group didn't visit Masada. It happened. It happens not very often, but it happens, when those flash floods are coming down, a lot of water to the Dead Sea. Unless you are capable to dam, to stop part of that, to build a dam, and from that dam, build a carrier, a water carrier, an aqueduct, and start leading the water to the places where you want the water to be. Is it enough? What is missing? So you bring the water, and then what do you do with the water? Are you filling bottles? So you have to have storage. Storage, yes? 14 cisterns were built here. 14 water cisterns were carved, not even built. They carved them, in the natural stone. 12 of them were carved on the other side of the mountain at the bottom. That's how the water was driven along the aqueducts and was coming into those cisterns, and 2 others were carved on the mountain. So how did the water come to the top of the mountain? By hands, by donkeys, by hands, by carrying the water. Only the 12 lower cisterns got the water from the flood, and then from that point people had to carry the water. Okay, we have in in the Yiddish language, we have a word schlepping. I don't know how many of you know that word, schlepping. Okay, and the people had to carry the water all the way up to the top, and they had a place to dump the water here. 2 cisterns. I'll show you later one of them. This is how they got water here on Masada. When these 14 cisterns were filled with water, and this is something that we checked in 1963 when we excavated Masada, we discovered that they could contain, okay, water which was enough to fill 80 million bottles like this. These 14 cisterns could keep water for 80 million bottles like this. Can you imagine how much water they could store here in this place? These are the 5 facts. Maybe it's too early for you to appreciate those facts, but you know what? In between the lines, I can tell you that you have already 75% of the story. All I have to do now is just to put a few more details on top of these 5 facts, and I finish my job. I finished my job, I didn't finish my mission. Whatever we know about Masada is coming from the same book that I mentioned so many times yesterday and the day before. The book of Josephus Flavius. And of course the excavations that were done here. So what do we know about Masada? We know that the whole story of Masada, from the very beginning till the end, took 100 years. That's all. It's not a tale like thousands of years. 100 years. Who was the first to build Masada? Why did he build Masada?
Summer home.
In the summer it's so hot here.
Winter home.
Why did he build Masada on a mountain?
Defense.
Safe protection.
Place.
Why? Because we saw yesterday how unprotected was his palace in Jerusalem. And he found this mountain, which is very high, close to En-Gedi, water in the winter, yes? And he started to build all the buildings that we see here on the mountain during his time. Could he be a king without a palace? Of course not. Could he be a king without a bathhouse? Of course not. So he built all of that, and he built the storerooms to put the food inside. And you will see how big are the rooms which used to store the food. And then he put a wall. On top of the mountain, you can see the wall, built on top. And he also built these 14 water cisterns, having so much water inside. Historically, we know that Herod visited Masada 5 times during his life, and that's it, period. That's it. And I will show you his beautiful palace, standing on Masada, gorgeous place. He was here only 5 times. Very busy person. From one side to build so many projects, from the other side to kill so many people, it makes you busy. So no time to have fun here on Masada. Herod died in the year 4 BC. From the death of King Herod, during the next 70 years, we do not... Hello, בבקשה. The next 70 years, we don't hear much about Masada. What do we know that happened here? During those 70 years, we do know that there was a Roman garrison that was stationed here, and they didn't have a lot to do beside monitoring, watching. And this is why we don't hear so much of something special going on the mountain. And 70 years later, it starts again. 70 years later, we are at the beginning of that revolt against Rome, the Jewish war. The Great Revolt against Rome. Started in 67 CE or AD, it's the same. A year later, in 68, a group of almost 1,000 Jews left Jerusalem. They are known as the Zealots. Who are the Zealots? You know what? I will choose another name for them. Freedom fighters. Freedom fighters. We saw them in the movie down there, all dressed up with the white robes, you know, crossing the desert with Torah books in their hands, bringing their families behind, women and children, and they are going to the new destination they left, Jerusalem. 967 men, women, and children. So Masada came up, pushed the Roman garrison from this mountain, settled down here. Everything was ready for them here. All the Herodian buildings. But since we are talking about ordinary people, when they saw a palace, they made it a kitchen. And when they saw the bathhouse, it became for them an oven. So they adjusted all the buildings on the mountain to their life. And they started to build new life here on Masada. What happened 2 years later, in the year 70 AD? The destruction of Jerusalem, the temple in Jerusalem. Do you know that historically, after taking Jerusalem, the Jewish people are still fighting against Rome? It was not the end of the war. The Jews are still fighting from 3 more places. One we saw yesterday, that strange mountain near Bethlehem, Herodion. You remember the mountain that we saw, yes? The other one in Jordan, a place called Macaros. That's where John the Baptist lost his hand. And the third place was Masada, the mountain where we are sitting. So welcome to the last Jewish stronghold, because the other 2 will be taken within a short time. Masada is standing as the last stronghold against the Roman Empire. The few here against the many coming against them.